secret files of Teletraan 2.
Hello, everyone. I'm alive. I am still on a bit of a hiatus, but I happened to be at home for a day, and I had the ability to record. And I said, "Oh, I'm not missing out on this." So we are once again back to talk about the IDW comics in our now. Oh my God, we've had this going on for at least half a year, maybe longer. Series reviewing IDW, how it's gone, our thoughts on different topics, and this is one I am really wanting to be delved into for about going on 5 years now. I sometimes go off on a little bit of a Twitter rant on this, kind of organizing my thoughts, but I haven't had an opportunity really to say it out loud in a long time. And we're talking about Mord Meets the Eye and Lost Light. And joining me today is a man who I believe made the best Titan figure, and then no one else can get it because it lives in his house, I'm assuming. General Tekno.
Thank you. A long-time listener, a first-time participant.
Yeah. How long from someone whose biggest custom job was I painted the flame toys like Nova Prime? How long did it take you to make that?
Which one are we talking about? The Omega Supreme Lugnut Supreme or the Arc Lugnut Supreme?
I haven't seen the Arc one, so we're going to say Omega.
Okay. The Omega one, I'm trying to think. I don't think that one was that long actually. It's like I mostly use spray paints for that stuff. So once you get everything disassembled and stuff, it generally goes fairly quickly as far as stuff goes. The Arc one took a bit longer, but that one was, from what I remember, more because of the just weather and needing to get the 3D printed parts and such.
Gotcha. So, do you design the parts yourself, or do you get them done by someone else?
I have gotten this done by friends and such. Actually, Moonbase 2 listener, Stupid Monkey is the one who did the head on that first Lugnut there. He did the faceplate for that.
Nice.
The second one I did for Arc Lugnut, that worked out well because Sam of Sam's Forge was actually working on that sort of stuff himself. So I'd gotten into contact to ask about that when I saw he was doing Omega designs, and we were able to back and forth, and I got parts through him. So for that one.
Excellent. Because I'm just looking at some photos now, and they look insane.
Yeah. And then for the reboot fans out there, I did Gigabyte as well earlier this year, and Stupid Monkey did the head on that one too.
Nice. What did you do Gigabyte out of?
That was another Arc one. The Arc kept going on sale, so I kept buying Arcs.
They're like
I'm
€100
actually just
here at the moment.
Yeah, I just started my last Arc custom this past week. So
what's it going to be?
That one is going to be the Death Egg robot.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Movie or game?
Fun, so. Leaning more towards game for the deco. So
okay. So keep an eye out for that. General Tekno on Twitter. Definitely worth keeping an eye on. But anyway, sir, like I said in the opening, I've been wanting to do this for a good long while for various reasons. I ask everyone this: how did you come to IDW?
I guess I came to IDW. This was back in the Asian days when I was getting back into Transformers. Around the time that was. Yeah, I guess that would have been 05, 06 when I was starting to get back into the fandom after having not really been into it once Beast Machine stopped airing when I was a kid, and then just the occasional Marvel comics at the library. But because the movie was coming out, so that kind of got my attention. I saw, they're doing 10th anniversary Beast Wars series too, and that was kind of my gateway drug, the 10th anniversary figures, and then starting to buy more stuff from there, and then Classics happens, and I started reading the IDW books around then, and then that was also around when I started just buying comics again in general. So I've been reading this stuff since close to the beginning. I didn't start right at the beginning, but close.
I think I started reading around All Hell Megatron, but I started reading the book. I read the other books first, so I did read I think All Hell I was reading live, and the other ones I was reading preemptively. No, that's not a sentence.
Right.
So, 2009, 2011, tumultuous period in the comics. to put it say it at the least. Can you tell I haven't done this in a while? But we did get one book out of it that was universally acclaimed. It was also one of the few Transformers books to make an impression on the wider comic reading audience, which was Last Stand of the Records. Written primarily at the time, we learned later, by Nick Roach, with help by James Roberts, but generally seen as kind of a dual effort. That book got a lot of attention. It got James 2 issues of the ongoing, again, which would be widely regarded as some of the best comics of the time. He then co-wrote the tail end of the ongoing, and after it became clear that Dan Abnett and such were not going to continue on with their original plan post Heart of Darkness and doing their own ongoing, we found out there would be a big soft reboot, Phase 2, where John Barber would be sort of the head editor guy, but he would also be writing Transformers Robots in Disguise, and James Roberts would be writing Morden Meets the Eye. To say it had an effect on the internet fandom would be something of an understatement. But
yeah.
Do you remember your first encounter with Morden Meets the Eye?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I was picking it up, like, I can't remember if I got the digital one or not when that came out for the first issue, but I definitely picked up the first issue, in comic stores anyway, like that Wednesday. So I was definitely looking forward to it, though. At that point, like with Roberts, I'd honestly been excited for Roberts doing IDW stuff ever since going back to the All Hail Megatron Coda issue, where he got listed in the credits on the Cup story that Nick Roche had written there. And that was purely because of the fact that at that point I had read James Roberts' old Transformers UK fanfic, Eugenesis. So I was like, where do I know the name from?
I've never read that. I've been meaning to get a copy for ages, but I've never read it.
Yeah, it's I think TF Archive has it on their website there as a digital copy. Like, that's where I read it way back in the day. So, and yeah, I mean, like, that definitely hyped me up for the book there, and I'll probably end up touching on that a little bit later, like, as we're going on. But yeah, no, it was a good first issue. Like, Last Stand of the Records had been really good, so I was looking forward to this. And then, like, that whole era of IDW, incidentally, with the Morden Meets the Eye, Robots in Disguise, kind of got me into the whole of, I can't wait until Wednesday evening to pick up my comics. I need to get the digitals the night before and then read those too. I haven't done that in a while, but yeah, like, and that was also around the era, I think it was later Costa years, when I'd started listening to Underbase back in the day. So, and then I got into Moonbase 2 through that eventually. So,
I'm sorry.
But you guys have been good to me for anime recommends, so I can't complain.
Watch Fruitopia.
Yes, it's great. Please watch it.
Oh, it's so good. They had Fang Joker last week, and I nearly cried. You got to see, like, this is completely off topic, but you got to see, like, because I always saw people saying, like, let's do a custom of, like, a base form Fang Joker without all the spikes, and they put it in the anime. I was like, my god!
I just loved when we got the motorcycle chase to WX. That was perfect.
I'm doing a show on Fruitopia. I am doing a show on Fruitopia. I don't care if it gets terrible after the last half, but, like, my god. So Morden Meets the Eye, like, for myself, I distinctly remember it. Like you said, it was kind of, I was more excited for RID actually at the time, because I'd been reading the John Barber movie comics, and I was really shocked by how good some of them were.
Yes, those were fantastic.
And I wanted to see what he could do without sort of the trappings of, hey, you're stuck writing for, in a very tight box. But I'd loved Last Stand of the Records, and I was really interested. And I think it was, at the time, it was more Nick's art drawing me, which would turn out only to be one issue. And Alex came in and went absolutely insane. But I came away very impressed from the first issue. I would say that is the strongest first issue of a Transformers book, just period. I thought it established its characters well, its tone, dealt with a huge roster, introduced interesting elements like Cyclonus and whatnot. And then I was really impressed. And yeah, like you said, it helped me get into weekly comic shopping. Like, I started buying comics in general because, like, I'm buying comics. I'm buying the Transformers on Wednesday. What else is coming out on Wednesday? And then it sort of snowballed from there. which is how I ended up reading Godzilla Rulers of the Earth, actually. But then it went on to be basically a cultural phenomenon among Transformers. It had a huge, and I do think, like, no matter how much I love John's work, it did not have the cultural impact that More Than Meets the Eye had. The Transformers comics were suddenly being discussed in the wider comic book reading fandom. There were news articles, there were news stories on TV, there was newspaper articles. The LGBT elements got a lot of focus from LGBT targeted comic book websites. Huge praise for drama, character humor, art. Alex was getting rave reviews and everything else. And I would say season 1 is very much when we became validated, because hey, look, ours is art too, for want of a better term.
Yes.
But then we hit the Dark Cybertron arc, which John and James both wrote, but obviously had a lot of editorial mandates and everything else that they didn't have much say in. And then we move on to season 2. We bring in the most controversial element, at least at the time, which was Megatron as an Autobot. It would go on, again, to be critically acclaimed, well-loved, everything else. Eventually, the big reboot for the Hasbro universe happens and we get Lost Light. Lost Light is, again, well-received at first, but then talk dies down.
Yep.
And in general, we started moving towards more normalized elements of Transformers comic talk in the wider world, which is basically occasionally there's one website who's got a dedicated Transformers comic reader.
Mm-hmm.
And Lost Light and Optimus Prime both suffered from this. And then halfway through the book, James gets told, you do not have a 4-year plan, you have another year left. And it had a big effect, in my opinion, on the tail end of the book. So what I wanted to say, like, your general opinion on More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light as an entire unit first, and then I want to, like, delve in for, like, as we go deeper. So what do you think?
Certainly. Yeah, I thought I'm going to start off, I thought it was a fantastic series. You're right with regards to the stuff that was getting truncated at the end, absolutely. One thing I did want to mention when you were talking about comic news sites and stuff there too, in terms of getting into the cultural zeitgeist, I do feel that was a major part of the success of More Than Meets the Eye, which would be very difficult to duplicate today. Just the fact that early 2000s and even mid 2000s, I suppose, online comics press was definitely better than it is now. In terms of just like the big thing is we don't have Comics Alliance anymore.
Yeah.
And Comics Alliance, for people who don't remember that, like they were a blog site. They did a lot of like very good analyses on articles and such back in the day. And they eventually, unfortunately, suffered from the standard thing of getting bought up by a parent company that just decided one day to axe the whole site and keep everything up for the SEO money. But yeah, it's you bring that up about Lost Light. I actually had to check timelines on this because it made me curious. Comics Alliance, when I was looking up last night, it got shuttered about mid 2017 or so, like just with no warning at all. And Lost Light continued into late 2018. So there is a part of me that does wonder to what extent that whole run was handicapped by the fact that one of the major sites that was giving it a lot of attention just through articles they were writing about the book just suddenly stopped writing anything altogether.
No, that's an interesting. I hadn't considered that one. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, I just thought about that when you were talking about that stuff there. Like, it's hard to. That's one of those reasons why I don't think you can actually replicate the success of the book anymore, unfortunately, because you had that perfect storm of comics press. And then even just like when we got the just the Chrome Dome Rewind storyline in season 1, that was also like a perfect storm of timing as well too, because of just stuff that was going on in the real world. Like you had there was a lot more tension on LGBTQ rights. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of attention on that now these days for unfortunately the wrong reasons, because it feels like we're in a backslide. But like at the time there was a lot of very positive, very forward progress that was going on just in the world in general, and that probably just helped. It just got lumped into as one of the other signposts on that oh hey, Transformers is doing this stuff. But yeah, it was a very influential book. As someone who loves continuity and loves canon, that is one thing I always appreciated with Roberts, that it was a run that didn't ignore like a lot of the canon from prior issues and such. Costa had worked in some of that, but let's be honest, from an editorial standpoint, we did not have an editor who really gave like two licks about any sort of continuity, except when people were yelling at him on the IDW boards.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, boy.
God, I did like a rant back in the day. If anyone remembers the travesty that was Transformers Continuum, God, I did like a 30-minute YouTube rant way back in the day where I just like ranted about that whole issue. It's just I can't rewatch that, but God, I was so mad when that came out, and just all of the blatant continuity errors in the book that was supposed to be the catch up on continuity.
Oh, I
Like that
remember
set the
that.
tone for that era.
He got so mad. He got so mad at people
Yeah,
for saying, "Hey, maybe you should have not done that kind of book, sir."
yeah. It fascinates me really, considering that he's also the editor who at Marvel brought back all the Cosmic Marvel stuff under his watch. Like Annihilation was his project, from what I remember correctly.
Mm.
And it's just fascinating, just how sometimes writers who can do very well and have, or editors who can have a lot of success in one field, then completely fumble the ball when they move on to something else. I
Mm.
mean, that was Mike Costa right there in a nutshell as well. Like his Transformers run was very uneven, to be be a bit generous. But I loved his work on GI Joe, and he went on after that to write for Lucifer, and that was a fantastic series.
I didn't know he wrote for Lucifer.
Yeah, he was in the writers' room on Lucifer.
Huh. I love Lucifer. And like people look at me sometimes, it's like, "You watched Lucifer?" And I'm like, yeah, it's really good.
Lucifer was amazing.
If you like crime drama and supernatural nonsense, and like, what if it's the class thing? What if the devil wasn't that bad? Like, no, it's a great show.
Yeah, and then Netflix got it, and suddenly all the people who weren't watching it started watching it and went, "Have you seen this?" And those of us who had been watching it were like, "Yes, we've been watching it all this time and telling people to watch it."
Where I think then Netflix got it and it didn't get shit. It got better.
Yeah, they got more, and they did better because of the Netflix exposure. How often does that happen? That a show keeps going because of Netflix. Okay, I guess Cobra Kai as well, but
yeah, no, that's a good example. Because Cobra Kai was like on a dying platform from day one, the poor thing.
Yes,
But
yes.
but yeah, there's a new season of that out, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm hyped to watch that.
Need to watch it. But yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I thought really good point pointing out the connection with Comics Alliance and stuff like that. Because I remember when there was I don't remember the writer's name. I think he was supposed to write a Transformers book at one point, and he never did. And he was doing like a monthly or a weekly like reading a volume, and he would just be raving about it every time.
Yes, that was Chris Sims who.
Yeah. And like he did all of Morden Meets the Eye. I don't think he did Lost Light.
Yeah, I don't think he got that far. Like when I think he eventually caught up to where Morden Meets the Eye was. So
yeah. Because I think it was like the first Humble Bundle.
That's right. Yeah. He did buy it because of that, I think, and then he ended up getting into it through that and just ravey. And then it's just nuts how it just turned into articles of, yeah, you guys need to be reading this book. I'm going to just write an entire article series about why you need to be reading this book.
It was pretty impressive. And he was he was making a lot of the points I would have been making at the time. But it was. I'm going to go into something I think which I don't want to phrase it this way because it's not quite the right thing. I think there's a bit of seasonal rot that really sets in. Like looking back, you can see hints of it in mid-season 2, but I think it's by far the most important Transformers book ever written. The most important Transformers story ever told.
Right.
For so many reasons. As you said, like it was a time when we were actually making like strides in representation for people of all stripes, and the fact that a non-sexual, a non-sexual like presenting gay relationships were showing up in popular fiction that was getting big time like stories written about them and focus and normalized and everything else. And major female characters who weren't being sexualized and stuff like that. And then just like dramatic sci-fi drama, highly creative sci-fi, people were getting afraid their favorites were all going to die.
Yep.
Alex's art just came together so well. I think he got off to a good start, but I think it was around issue 6 or so when he really came into his own.
Oh yeah,
And
Alex's stuff, he kept pushing himself too. Like he never
yeah.
was like he was very much the artist who it was never good enough where he was at. He was always like, but can I do more?
And like he before then was kind of regarded as a bit of an okay artist at best because he was on books like Dreamwave and Megatron Origins, which were just crippling in so many ways.
Yes, I remember being on the Allspark back in the day. A lot of
Mm.
people did not like Milne's work on the Allspark like back in the day until around when he took over from Don during the ongoing.
And even now, I
And
don't
he
think his
used the
ongoing work compares.
No, it does not. But like
Mm.
just the fact that like I loved his stuff from I guess like going back to the movie stuff because I thought he always drew those plots very well. But yeah, like he really started to come into like started to gain notice at that point there because before that he did get a lot of derisive attitudes probably because of stemming from the Dreamwave days. And then yeah, like more than meets the eye, you're right. He came into his own on that. Unicron, like which wasn't part of this book, was amazing, and I was genuinely afraid he was going to work himself to death.
Yes, no, I adore Unicron. I think Unicron is absolutely fucking glorious.
Mhm.
And whenever someone says they don't like it, I
Mhm.
personally hunt them down.
Yes, and if anyone's listening who actually like hires people in comics, please remember to hire Alex Milne for something because that man needs more work.
Yes, and he needs sleep as well. So it would be good if he was drawing
He
something that didn't have a billion details.
he needs sleep and yeah. Well, the problem is he'll probably do that anyway. So like I genuinely get afraid. Like just the man's health over the last year has been one of those things where it's like I've been like, oh no, this is the sort of thing I was afraid of. Like as he was drawing all this really good stuff.
Definitely.
Unlike George Perez, he doesn't get residuals on Transformers stuff, so hire him for
No.
stuff that's not licensed comics.
No, that was another thing. True more than meets the eye, I would say again, more than Robots in Disguise. We started getting an insight into how things were actually working behind the scenes. The guy at Hasbro, Mike at Hasbro, who was communicating things, who came up with the idea of Megatron and everything. But then like you said, we find out you don't get paid for the work you did. You don't get residuals. Huh. That seems unfair. But the effect it had in the fandom, I think, is shocking. You're feeling it now. You're still feeling it now. Like I'll never forget when that article went up saying that girls aren't and it's how it was phrased, girls aren't into geeky things, and they got a psychologist to say like, well, men are into collecting, and men, you see, like to gather things because they're hunter gatherers.
Oh
And I was
God,
just
I
like sitting
forgot
here
about
going,
that.
I was sitting here going like, you don't know a bloody thing about evolution, you wanker. I got interviewed for that afterwards because I pointed out like your psychologist does not know what evolution is. And then I got
That's right. That's right. The rebuttal article.
yeah.
Like God, I remember reading that and thinking, have you ever been to a convention?
Yeah. And it was just a general like geek article, but like there was a huge pushback from the UK, a lot of the UK ones, the UK fandom, for Transformers, and just saying like, listen, like we have a lot of ladies and a lot of people who do not identify as male, and they are all very interested and very cool. And we did, the TF Nation released the statistics, and like I think it was like, yeah, we've gone to about half non-male attendees.
Yeah, I
And it's
believe that. I mean,
going up.
yeah.
And our
Around
number
that
at the same time,
like,
it wasn't like we're dropping off. It was just like it's getting bigger, and we're still getting these kind of like demographics.
oh yeah, like I went to my first TFCon at like over here in Canada in 2008, and I noticed the same thing too happening over the years, where it's like you got more and more women coming to the conventions there, and they are always the best people, like from a fandom standpoint too. Like just oh my God, the creative output. Like it's just the costumes, the artwork, like there's just so much amazing stuff that comes out of I mean just out of the whole fandom, I suppose, but like that whole side of the fandom just brought an entire new energy, like some fresh energy to the entire fandom in general.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Like I always think like whatever about losing the porn, Tumblr's changing hands led to us losing one of the best resources we had for popular fan art. Because like they all because a lot of them were connected to the, shall we say, the sexy side of it. and they then left because they were being treated like shit. And then suddenly, like, if you go through Tumblr now, like, you just do not see the variety, or, like, I don't want to say the quality, because people are always doing their best, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I absolutely think that anyone who says More Than Meets the Eye was insignificant or not a cultural touchstone was not there.
Yeah. And you're bringing up Tumblr too. Yeah, that is
Mm.
another major thing I didn't even think about, just the impact of Tumblr being around at that point as a resource for that comic's popularity, because
Absolutely.
like that Transformers Prime was getting a lot of shares as well too on Tumblr. But yeah, More Than Meets the Eye got a lot. You have all the fan art, you have the fanfics and stuff. And when did Yahoo ruin Tumblr timeline wise? I'm trying to remember.
2015, 16, I think.
Okay, again, I'm wondering this from the standpoint of when we were talking about the IDW stuff petering out.
When did Tumblr change hands?
Because Yahoo didn't get rid of the porn stuff right away. So
no, they bought it. They kept it for a little bit, and then like it's still a very active website.
Yes, it is, but it's not what it was.
No,
that was 2018 that they did that.
2018, okay.
And again, that's interesting timing considering. Oh no, I guess that would have been like near the end of Lost Light.
Would have been near the end, but it's an interesting, like, you can definitely see the effect on the fan output, because while, like, people moved on to Twitter or looked for other potential ones, or Fansly, or, like, I know some Transformers artists who were on there do OnlyFans now for it. Suddenly they all went from being all centralized all over the place.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you find them? Like, because sometimes I go looking for art and I'm just like, I can't find a damn thing because you've all gone everywhere.
Right. And what feels significant too, just for the impact on like just the fan artist community, is just how, like, even like this many years on from the book ending, we still, the major output from the fan art community still is generally that era of comics. Like, even though we've gone several years of the Brian Reckley stuff, for instance, like that has not caught on in the same way that those More Than Meets the Eye designs did in the fandom.
Absolutely not. Like, no matter how divisive Reckley's run may be, or like how much people might say love, like, people love Flame War. Like, Flame War is like largely
Flame War is
universally
fantastic.
loved. But she doesn't have anything like the representation in fan creations that Nautica or Drift have.
No, absolutely not. So it's not like, say, I mean, even with More Than Meets the Eye stuff, I mean, look at all the third-party toys. I've got a whole shelf full of them.
Yo, absolutely. Like, I'm just shocked we haven't added a node, to be honest. But which will be a complicated topic in a bit. But yeah, like, you do not see it. I think one of the problems Reckley's run has with that is that they're so tied to the toys.
Yes. There's definitely a lot less freedom there from a design standpoint. So,
in that which case, why don't I have a third-party Trick Diamond followed by a third-party combiner? But we won't say that out loud.
We need more we need another Trick Diamond, please.
Yes, we do. Also, the rest of them. Give me Megatronia.
Bite the bullet on Mandarake already.
I can't. It costs more than my heart. I'd have if I bought a new heart, it would just be like cheaper than that. I look at it sometimes. I'm just like, I mean, I could, but I do need to pay rent. But then I could. One day, if I'm in a new job and if it settles in and I'm earning good money, I'll be honest, I'm just going to crack and get her. And then, like, it's going to be like, there's a 6-year dream fulfilled. Longer now. Oh my god, I'm old.
Yeah.
So I've been hinting at it and everything else. For me, I do not think Lost Light compares to More Than Meets the Eye for a variety of reasons. I'm going by what you said. I think you do connect with it a lot more.
Lost Light, I did enjoy Lost Light a lot, don't get me wrong. I mean, that said, yeah, I will agree that the heyday was definitely More Than Meets the Eye, and like, just even like the season 2 stuff with the Autobot Megatron, like, I was thinking back on a lot of those last night, and even like reread Dying of the Light, and it's like just how good that season 2 is. They took a genuinely, like, they took one of those things that was like just a spitballed idea thrown out by Michael Kelly of Hasbro, as you mentioned, in just a general pitch meeting, and the amount that they did with that idea was just amazing. In terms of, like, just with the whole Autobot Megatron thing. Like, I mean, I imagine we'll circle back to that later, but yeah, that was a amazing concept, and just the amount of work they did with that in that book.
And it
Like, Shane's
and
really delved into it.
that's one of those things that had a lot of influence in wider Transformers fiction because
Yes.
suddenly every Megatron is sympathetic on some level, like
Mhm.
to the point where like the War for Cybertron is trying to do like super villainous Megatron, and they're even making him sympathetic. They're,
Oh,
they're,
yeah.
they're making it
That's
not great, but they're making it sympathetic.
That is true. It was one of those things that I actually did appreciate the Ruckley run for, in that it was a bit of return to form to a
Yeah, he
Megatron
was
who
just a
is
dick.
not sympathetic.
He's
Like, that was
just a
fun
dick.
seeing an actually evil Megatron again.
He's an incompetent dick.
Yes, he is selfish. He is using politics as his vehicle to get into power.
Mm.
And then stuff spirals out of control because he's not a master tactician.
Nope.
And he just
So
goes with
like
it.
that was always something that was really like I'll give the Rocky Run credit for that and huge amount. Like what they did with Megatron and in the long run was such a
Yes.
weirdly refreshing thing in these days, especially since I'm just by trailers and like I think Earthspark's going to go down the not good but not evil Megatron route. Just
Yeah, it looks like they're
by
going for more of a gray Megatron there, and I'm looking
yeah.
forward to Earthspark.
Oh no, looking forward to it. Like God, I love that design.
Yes.
But what I find myself thinking about more than meets a lot is it's strange. Like I adore season 1, and Megatron is my favorite Autobot. Period. He dethroned Grimlock. He is my favorite Autobot. I have the Flame Toys kit right behind me in a contemplative pose next to the IDW Optimus. I will always say the biggest crime of IDW is that Soundwave Optimus and Megatron don't meet in the Phase 3 era, because what a conversation that would have been.
Yes.
My favorite
The
Optimus
Optimus
gone
and
down a dark
Megatron.
road, my favorite Soundwave, and my favorite Megatron gone down the light road, all in one room.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, just even, I mean, the Optimus Prime Megatron. Yes, it's crazy that, really thinking about it, their last conversation wasn't that. Yeah, wasn't their last conversation the Chaos Theory one?
The last conversation they had was just after Dark Cybertron, where
I guess there's
yeah.
Yeah, I guess there's that one, but it wasn't the last, like, in-depth
Oh yeah,
conversation, though. Their last in-depth heart-to-heart talk was when Megatron was a prisoner aboard, like, the Autobot ship, and he still was very much playing the role. But
Yeah.
that was the beginning of when he started to realize he might be playing a role.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
sorry,
Yeah, no, you're right.
not that he might be playing a role, but it was the very beginning when he started to realize that maybe I'm not playing a role.
Yeah,
Maybe this is
just like,
actually who I am.
oh no, oh no, I bought into the hype. But I adore him. Fantastic design, of course. But
Yes.
he's something I find fascinating. Like why I'm drawn to like evil character redemption story arcs, which
Mhm.
is something we can't have in the real world. And I've said this before, which is what if Hitler genuinely felt sorry? What
Yeah.
would you do? What would we do? And what would
Yeah.
he do? Like, would you give him a chance to atone? Would you just shoot him and leave it there because, oh my God, look at all the shit you pulled? Hey, Hitler, look at the shit you pulled.
Yeah. We even
But
got the killing Hitler as a baby element in
yeah,
season 2.
yeah. And like something it always bugs me in like mainstream comics is like when that happens with Magneto or Juggernaut or Riddler or whatever, just like, okay, when's the reset button? When's this going
Yeah.
to be turned back? Like,
It,
we never do that here.
it's depressing when you get reset buttons on some of those characters as well,
Mm.
especially like on someone. Although with Magneto, I find it fascinating to the extent to which, he has managed to persist across a number of resets at this point, because it turns out that people actually like the idea of Magneto somewhat becoming more of a morally gray character.
Yeah, like
Like,
people like it. Like,
who knew Grant Morrison, that people like a morally gray Magneto?
shh, 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 he'll hear you. He watches, he waits, he wants to murder everything. He thinks we're all wizards. But Grant Morrison's an interesting guy for anyone who hasn't ever looked into him. And like it's not just Megatron. Like Rodimus, I think, is a fantastic take on the character. One of my favorite Rodimus conversations is when he's talking to Minimus and he doesn't know it, and he says, "Yeah, what I did was I'd get Ultra Magnus to say something, and I'd get Drift to say something, and I knew they'd cancel each other out, and then I just do what I want." Which is why I love where that makes that Red Alert scene so much more important, because like he goes, Ultra Magnus, what do you think? I want to hear what Drift thinks, and then obviously what
Right.
Drift agreed with him, and he didn't have his out. Which is something I love. Cyclonus as well, like the best version of Cyclonus. everything going on like that.
Oh yes, and that directly impacted Ruckley's take on the character too.
Exactly. Yeah. Swerve as well. Like, I love Swerve. I'm possibly the only person, especially for someone who is critical of the development later, who really likes Swerve. I really like Swerve because it's just a character study of Swerve.
I don't get why that story got disliked. That was like a fun. I mean, admittedly, as I'm coming at this too as someone who grew up, watching some of those shows
Yeah.
that were being portrayed in there. So like, I was like, oh my god, Roberts is going full bore on these sort of referential.
Yeah. I think for some people, like, any reference like that is too much, but I think hindsight, it was kind of a prelude to some of the stuff we'd get. It's
Plus,
also
just
probably the most extreme he does.
Plus, I mean, you have the whole Sad Clan element as well with Swerve too, and that really put the punctuation on just the idea that had been building for a bit, just that Swerve was not a happy person.
No. One of the, I think it's issue 11, 12 of season 1, which is like he's out there drunk, and Ultra Magnus is drunk, and he's like, everyone likes you, Swerve. And he's like, people laugh at my jokes. Not quite the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, so like there's just so much good in More Than Meets the Eye. DJD, holy crap.
Yes.
Also, something I actually want to touch on is like what effect that had on some of the fandom when their arc got resolved, and how much it made me realize people were taking the wrong thing away from them, and why I don't like Nickel. They were just such a especially as we're moving into the morally grey Decepticon era. The Decepticons are people too, introducing this group that are just raw belief, and what that
the
does.
McMurder face.
Yes, like. The people who are like, they'll kill you, and they'll do it violently and brutally, and they will never worry about it, and they'll enjoy it because they really believe what they're doing. Like,
and they won't do it like as in like a horror murder. They'll do it while reciting the works of Shakespeare, explaining why you should be murdered.
Yeah, and it's like, listen, you need to die, and you need to understand why exactly you need to have legs first.
Yes.
And it's okay that you don't like it. It's fine, but you need to be told.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to blow up.
Yeah, I love how Tarn loved the sound of his own voice.
Yeah, and it is totally the Goliath voice. It's totally Keith David in my head.
Oh yeah, when I was just rereading Dying to Light last night, part of this was because I had I guess the last thing I saw him in was Amphibia, Keith David. So like it was very much like it was very easy for me to read just like the range of Keith David's performance in Tarn as he is slowly unraveling over that story.
And it's a strong, something like the book doesn't get enough credit for, in my opinion, is how strong the finales are.
Yes. Roberts put a lot of work into those finales.
Yeah. I think they're both season 1 or 2. I think are just fantastic. I think The Lost Light has a good finale. I think it's a lot more up and down, but and I think there's some definite.
Yeah, I just reread the finale last night just to refresh my memory, and it was a lot of high points in that finale, a lot of resolution. It was very clearly all planned out from the start. Just he got to it sooner than he planned.
Yeah, and he doesn't know how to self-edit. But I'm doing this a lot. We'll get there. But I have so much praise for season 1 and season 2, and again, I'm going to have a show about this as well. I've just an infinite amount of praise for John Barber's work as well. I think John Barber is the unsung hero of our entire franchise, and possibly has a little altar in my house.
I love Barber's work. Oh my god.
Optimus Prime, I think, is one of my Optimus Prime is up against Talawler 1 for just what I think is just what an inventive, creative piece of brilliance.
Yes. And that last issue as well of Optimus Prime, in terms of just not even giving him an out in terms of and everyone agreed with him in the end.
No, it's just everyone has their own Optimus.
Yes.
And it doesn't really matter if you can tell you what he said in his last moments. Just we knew him, so we say what we think he said.
And thinking about current events, isn't that basically the discourse that's been over the last 48 hours?
Yeah, very much.
It just hit me there. Yeah.
Very, very much so. We don't know them, but we are, weirdly enough, this reminded me of a line from Orville, which is, we gave him his emotions, so we all knew a different version of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isaac. Yeah. With Isaac, yes.
Yeah. We all knew a different Isaac. Which I thought was Also, Orville season 3. Holy crap! But
So good. Renew at
why,
Disney.
why is it so good? Why? What happened? This was supposed to be a dumb parody show.
Because they finally took the limiters off Seth MacFarlane. That's why.
It's just like, oh, I can write just. I wanted to do a Star Trek. You told me to do a comedy. I can just do Star Trek. Okay. But yeah, so like just a huge amount of praise in this book. I don't know where to go. Like Nautica, great. Tailgate season 1, I really enjoyed it. Rodimus, like I said, great. Whirl, holy crap. Overlord was well done. Oh my god, that is one of the best pieces of you. This is terrible if you read it straight away, and it's so much worse if you read the book that came first. Like that moment, just like, oh no.
Yes, the basement reveal was that was a jaw dropper.
I talked to someone who hadn't read Last Stand. Wow, that seems important, and I just remember looking at them like, important.
That said, that jaw dropper was also competing with the jaw dropper that came in Robots in Disguise around the same time of, oh, Megatron and all those Decepticons you thought were dead aren't dead, and Prowl's working with them.
Yeah.
That splash page, like I remember like seeing that splash page and I remember just like it was like a holy cow moment.
Definitely, it was like, oh no, there's so much purple.
Yeah, that's still a desktop background on my old laptop.
It's a great scene. That's a great book. Have I mentioned that? I love that book so much.
Yeah.
It's such a good political drama.
Yes.
And it, oh
But
my
yeah,
god,
going
what
back-
it did with RC. But
going back to More Than Meets the Eye, there's so many notes. Like, what else was there in terms of just some of the imagery? I mean, Megatron on Necroworld.
Yeah, that is a. I think that is just like a fundamental scene for the book.
Mm-hmm. And of course, like one of those foundational things, which is still being felt as recently as Shattered Glass Volume 2, incidentally, is Senator Shockwave.
Yep. By the way, read Shattered Glass.
Yes.
Never thought I'd be saying that. But
yes, read issue 1 and then buy Blaster so you can read issue 2 now.
Yeah. I haven't read issue 2 because I can't afford Blaster at the moment. But he does look actually very nice. But yeah, no, Senator Shockwave. That was Overlord was like, oh wow, Shockwave what?
Yes, and the icing on the cake of that reveal was the page later of how in universe Senator Shockwave was not the big reveal. That was the thing everyone knew. The big reveal for Tailgate was that Orion Pax was Optimus Prime.
Yeah, that was.
And I loved that inversion of, oh yeah, the thing that the audience all knew is not the thing Tailgate knew.
Yeah, no, I love it. That was great. Also, I think that was his first, James's, I think in some ways his best subversion of expectations. Using the Ultra Magnus colors to kind of lean you into thinking, oh no.
No one saw the Shockwave reveal coming, and then and just the extent to which that ended up becoming the linchpin on Barber's work moving forward. So.
Also leading to the most amazing what the fuck moment. But
I still argue IDW 1.0 should be called Shockpoint because the entire continuity is Shockwave's fault.
No, I edited the caption on the IDW on his page and on TF Wiki. It used to say IDW is mostly his fault. IDW is entirely his fault, all capitals.
Yep.
But why did Hearts of Steel happen? Because Shockwave was bored. I'd love to see V Tropes page that's like, why do you do it? Why not? But yeah, so is there anything before I want to get into for me the analysis of what changed with the book as it went on? Is there any aspect of it you really want to dig into?
I mean, I think one of the things that I wanted to I think we all want to talk about this, so we may as well start with the Autobot Megatron stuff there because we've already danced around that a lot. Yeah, I thought that was a fantastic idea there, just to do that. It's nuts that basically got thrown out by the Hasbro guy in a pitch meeting, and then they just went with that, and it was just it's interesting too how you have the aspect as well of just. The audience goes along with this, and you really don't see even the feelings of the general crew because we are limited by point of view to just see the handful of command crew that we always see. So just even our own and then when the getaway reveal comes much later in season 2,
Mm.
where the entire crew joins up with Getaway against Megatron. It's one of those moments where it's like, yeah, Getaway is an asshole, but you have to admit he is 100% not wrong in like the whole thing of how can you forgive Hitler? He's Hitler.
Yeah.
And it's just we have been privileged as the audience to be seeing Megatron through a lens that doesn't treat him like Space Hitler.
Mm.
But but he very much is that. But yeah, with Megatron there, I did write a few notes on this here. Yeah, I love that. Like the question I was kind of thinking about last night even was just the notion of is Megatron worthy of any sort of redemption to begin with? Like that was like one of the fundamental questions that came in like from season 2 onwards into the beginning and end of Lost Light. Just the idea of can Megatron be redeemed and should he be redeemed? Like he was very much a case character. You know, he went from an ideologue to the revolutionary who kind of learned the hard way that violence was the only way he would get stuff done. He got a taste for the violence, spiraled outward in ambitions, and he eventually reached the part where he was like the detached clinical commander who was very much like, you know, playing. And all the while, he was very much on the mindset of, I am doing this because it is necessary. I am being the monster that I need to be in order to achieve my aims. Even in All Hail Megatron, having the attitude of, yes, I'm a monster. I bred an army of monsters in order to get my ambitions. And my ambition, and it was at that point when he won, he started to reflect on, yeah, my army of monsters is incompatible with what my actual plans are. So I'm gonna have to. So the army of monsters, I'm going to have to do something about that at some point because now I've stuck with an army of monsters. But yeah, and then it wasn't until like the chaos, I guess, the chaos theory stuff that he started to question the notion of, am I actually a monster? When I thought that I was just playing the part all along of being the monster as the necessary thing. And then and he moved in. He doesn't really start to question stuff until Dark Cybertron, and and once he gets on the Lost Light, it starts off as your standard Megatron. He always has an out in mind and machinations because he is genius. But then by the end of it, he is very much forced to reevaluate all his beliefs, even like at the beginning of Dying of the Light, where they essentially trick Megatron into helping save a bunch of organics. And that kind of completes his evolution there in the sense that up until then, he did not see organic beings as people. And at that point, he is and at that point he has very much come full circle in terms of like where he is at. And I'd forgotten about this angle entirely when I read until I reread Dying of the Light, the Fool's Energon angle there, which they had been seeding the notion of that Megatron has been taking this drug to weaken him. And you start to get a point there in Dying of the Light where he is like, maybe I am taking, is my personality being impacted by this drug? Like they start wondering, adding the whole idea of, are they going to give Megatron an out to be Megatron again? Is this all psychological? But even just the idea of, if this is medication, I don't want to stop it because I like who I am more than I used to be. And then just with the reveal at the end of the near the end that, there's no such thing as Fool's Energon. This is a genuine change that you've been going through all this time. But I think the thing that cements whether or not Megatron deserves redemption, honestly, is the fact that at the end of it all, he, even after like all the stuff that happens in Lost Light and such, he honestly does not believe he deserves redemption. And funnily, I would argue that is like the exact reason that he does, because he genuinely believes he is not worthy of it. Like if someone is genuinely repentant for their sins, then yes. I mean, it is a very thorny thing because there's all the people who do have to live with the consequences of those actions, like, and it's an entire species and many more in that case. But
and it's like it's like I have to live with the consequences of your actions, which is always something I think is always a very important distinction. It's not like living with the consequence. It's one thing to live with the consequence of what I did. I've got to live with the consequences of what you did.
Yes, and that's Getaway's argument in a nutshell right there. And that is a very valid argument. The idea that everyone in our species has PTSD because of you.
Like you are a monster. Like
yes,
you have done monstrous things, literally.
And what says it all is just when they meet back up with Megatron after he's talked about how he's been saving billions of lives from like his own species, that even then he is like, it will never be enough.
Yeah, like I always like that. And it's it's saving organics now, and it's just like you can see like he spent hundreds of years coming in this new direction, and just like you saved so many lives, not enough.
Yeah.
Just like, and is that because every life I lost, I feel responsible for, or is it like every time some of them died, I did this.
Yeah.
I did this.
And that last issue still hits me, like when I reread the last Lost Light issue with regards to how Megatron was just when Prowl is taking him away, that Rodimus is the one who has very much come around to that. No, he doesn't deserve this, and Megatron is 100%. You don't even need cuffs. I will go with you, but use them anyway. I will go with you willingly. I will submit to whatever you want to put me through because I deserve whatever you do to me.
Yeah, like the line. What was the line? Like, whatever it is, I deserve worse.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
again, you were saying like about his redemption and everything else. Did he deserve it? And for me, it always struck me because like I'm just like, no, you don't.
And it's
You
fast. It's
yeah.
it's fascinating too because
Mm.
it was also a case of we have Prowl being the mouthpiece of we need to Megatron must suffer the consequences, and this is after we have had the entire run of Prowl's character arc where, let's be honest, Prowl is a to say he is a morally compromised person is putting it
Prowl is a
very,
bad
very
man.
lightly with Prowl.
Prowl is a bad man.
Prowl is a horrible person in IDW who every so often decides to try and pretend he's not a horrible person and then backslides.
Yeah, basically, he has like 5 minutes of going like, I mean, I could do something. No, wait, no, I need to be
Mhm.
practical. Someone needs to die.
Yeah.
Fine. But yeah, no, I think that's
But
a really good summation of it.
But the fact that Prowl
Mm.
basically gets away with it.
Yeah.
Like the fact is that at the end of the day, like there is that added element in that book which you don't get unless you've read everything, that you know that the person who is going to be responsible for Megatron's final fate got away with a whole bunch of, while he may not have planned a war on the same scale of Megatron, he still has like a very bloody ledger and absolutely no repentance for it.
What was that one from Soundwave? Like when we first meet the Junkions, and Soundwave just goes, "Yeah,
Yes.
with Shockwave and Prowl, we don't know
Yes.
which one of them fired the trigger."
Yes, that I was actually thinking of that, but was like, well, this isn't this is a More Than Meets the Eye podcast. Should probably save that for the next one. But yes, you're absolutely right there. It's but it just adds it in all the more that it's like that it is Prowl of all people that is the person deciding the fate, that just really it just provokes that emotional reaction among the readers. And yeah,
Mm,
kudos to James for using all of that stuff there.
absolutely. I can't really add anything. Like Megatron is like I said, he's my favorite Autobot. He's just a fantastic, like, well done, deep, meaningful character, and I think he says so much about. I think people's reaction to him is so interesting. Like when people react badly to the idea of Megatron as an Autobot, they react so strongly against it, and I think it's like it gives you such an interesting window into how people react to fictional characters.
Mhm.
Because I've seen some people just like, I think it was a ridiculous story because he's a horrible person and it shouldn't have gone more than it should have been thrown in the
Yep.
bin the second someone had the idea. But
It's
yeah,
Steven Universe ending all over again.
yeah.
Except that in More Than Meets the Eye season 2, he's the and let's grapple with the implications of the ending for Steven Universe. Like,
um
yeah.
Yeah. Something I'd like to, because I can't. You're too eloquent. I can't actually add anything to that. Something I want to touch on is the new characters who came in season 2 in general. They were a very, very interesting roster. I think Riptide was probably the weakest one, and he was still fine.
Yes.
He was just kind of a gag. But Nautica, Getaway, Nightbeat, Trailbreaker, or whatever, Trailcut, or whatever they called it at the time.
Right.
They were such interesting additions to the crew. Nautica especially would very much rise to fame. And
Yes.
I found her fascinating. Like the idea, like she's this incredibly gifted, probably neurodivergent person who is she's so used to living in her own head,
Mhm.
and not being able to talk to anyone on her own level, and crew of misfits and people who don't fit
Yeah.
in. 10, I think, as well, was a really interesting addition to the crew.
Yes. Yes.
The idea of like he's an AI, like he's not a inverted commas natural occurring robot life form. He's an AI, but he's an AI that develops his own personality and willpower, and like he's an artist. You know, I think
Yep.
I really like that bit from that Ratchet issue where you see the mural he did in his little
Mhm.
house, where he's just
I
like,
always
these are my friends.
Yeah, I always wondered about the guys like 10 though, just the enforcers from
Hmm.
the standpoint of considering how they were made from harvesting other
Yeah,
living beings. I always did wonder to what extent is 10 a lobotomized person.
Well, like, I think he clearly has some sort of spark by the end of it. We do see that, but
Hmm.
he does this new roster. I found was really interesting because the initial roster was really hard to mess with.
Yes.
Because you had very key core characters, a lot of wild personalities. You had wild elements like Whirl and Cyclonus. You had Ratchet for like your grounding element. Ultra Magnus was basically a new character. Rodimus was just like this guy. You like, do you think he's a good leader or a bad leader? And ultimately, it's his story about he becomes a good leader. And then you add in these new guys to the mix, and they are just so shocking in some ways because they're a very different type, and so many of
Yes.
them would end up reconnecting with the Getaway side of the argument as well at times.
Hmm.
Like Getaway, I think, was an interesting addition because it very quickly moved into making him through the relationship with Tailgate.
Oh, yeah, that is something to talk about too. Just the
Mm.
tailgate and Cyclonus and all that. That
Yeah.
linkage.
Actually, you know what? I wanted to save this for later, but Tailgate is something I really want to talk to about because I think Tailgate is both a sign of what's very good about this book and what's very bad at times. Tailgate was basically because I think Tailgate is three completely separate characters.
Yeah.
Who are tangentially related, but every season there's a different person. Like the character is changed to, and as it went on, it became changed to suit fandom expectations.
Yes. Tailgate like definitely is the character who visibly changes the most across that entire
Yeah.
run. So
So the way I would put, like, when Tailgate was introduced, he was naive, he was a bit simple at times, but he was kind of honest and straightforward. But he didn't feel overtly young. He felt inexperienced, and then you find out like
Mhm.
he's 2 weeks old mentally.
Yeah.
But like it's like 2 weeks old for a Cybertronian may not exactly be the same thing.
Yes,
Um,
it's very tricky. It's very interesting you bring that up with regards to the
mm,
2 weeks, and that as humans we project ourselves onto characters, obviously, and
mm,
for Cybertronians it is very difficult to project that he's just a baby. On the one hand, there's the he's just a baby mindset because it's like he's only like 2 weeks old when the story starts, as you find out.
mm,
But then Cybertronians do not have childhoods like we do because they are very much all like all their innate programming and stuff is all in there from the start.
mm,
But then you start getting into some of the other stuff there later on, which then kind of makes you go, but like for instance, his whole matter form being a baby.
mm.
There was the what else? I mean, like the stuff with Getaway, for instance, which very much reads as like just very uncomfortable grooming there.
Yeah, Getaway is when season two. I was going to say season two is when you have this. To me, a different character because suddenly he's a child. Suddenly he's a
Mhm.
12, 13-year-old person just learning what relationships are, and like you never see like the more mature Tailgate from season one ever again.
Right. Though there
Suddenly
is the whole
Tailgate's
thing of he was very
very
much
gullible.
pretending to be that mature
Yeah,
person as well in season one.
he was, but the personality defined as, shall we say.
Mm, right.
Um,
I mean, season one as well, he was the audience POV character.
Very, very much so. In season two, he basically exists because of the romantic elements of the story.
Yes. Yes.
He's very much tied to those, and he's very much tied to Cyclonus's development. And I think Cyclonus turns out very
Yes.
well from that book. But then at the end of that, we go to the Lost Light, and I feel again this is a different character altogether again because suddenly, apart from the like he's accidentally hurting Cyclonus in his sleep. For me, he's just an abusive person. He
Yes. At that
suddenly
point, he
becomes
has.
very abusive to
It's.
everyone, like verbally, physically, and everything else.
Mhm.
And then when everyone gets very excited at the end of Lost Light when he unites with Cyclonus, I'm just like, Cyclonus, get the fuck out of there.
Yeah. It's fascinating though, considering how abusive Cyclonus himself was in like in early More Than Meets the Eye. Just
Well, yeah, no,
just the role shift there.
yeah,
Because
he was
people
not
forget, like, Cyclonus was a very abusive person at that point.
yeah, he hated everyone and everything and was not shy about it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, I will always point this out. Again, in season 2, when we get the call back to when Cyclonus beats Tailgate, nearly unconscious,
Mhm.
we get the apology. And
Yes.
because of how Tailgate's been framed in this story as both the younger person, like now the very youthful would-be romantic option, and also the very immature and innocent one. So
Right.
that takes on this like, oh wow, like Cyclonus is making this step forward, and we all need this to happen.
Mhm.
And then you read
Yes.
back in the issue, and what happened is Cyclonus said something very ambiguously. Tailgate made a fool of himself, came back in and punched him in the face. And then Cyclonus beat the shit out of him. But Tailgate did come in and punch him out of just sheer pique,
Right.
which weirdly informs the Lost Light version.
Yeah, I
In my
found it
mind.
interesting in Lost Light how how it felt like Tailgate was to an extent at a bit of a narrative dead end, to the point where he straight up got like buried buried and left behind.
Yeah, but because of something else that James had a slightly bad habit of, I was never like, oh, Tailgate's dead.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
That, I mean, that's another. Yes, James.
Mm.
You're right. James does have a bad habit of that. If that's if that's something we can seg into, actually, there,
Yeah, go ahead.
to bring up, like, that was one thing I find interesting looking back, that when because More Than Meets the Eye season 1 had a lot of dramatic moments there involving, oh my god, so and so is dead, and
Mm.
then that person would later turn out to be alive. And what I find interesting with that in mind is just with regards to James Roberts' reputation in general, like going into More Than Meets the Eye.
Mm,
In that,
mm.
like, going into the book, like, he had come off doing Last Stand of the Wreckers, which had a whole bunch of notable, like, some very gory, some very graphic, some very striking character deaths. And then before that, like, as someone who, had known him, come into contact with this stuff, reading Eugenesis way back in the way, that fanfic is very dark. It is very killy. I mean, it's got basically like the Quintessons doing their own version, like essentially genociding Cybertron.
Mm.
So there's a lot of, like, there's some very graphic stuff in that book there. But it's one of those things where you go in thinking Roberts is going to just, like, oh my god, he's like this, person who's going to off all these people. And then you start looking back at everything and notice that all the stuff that tends to have a lot of the very impactful, like, oh my god, deaths,
Mm.
all that has Nick Roche's name on it.
Yeah.
Like, going back to Spotlight Cup, like, where it's like, yeah, no, like, that has always been Roche's bag. And even going as far as, like, I still need to read the last issue of it, but with Last Bot Standing there, like, even with
Mm.
that, like, Nick Roche has never shied away from doing character deaths in his stuff.
Very much so.
That's a
James
strength, I
does.
would say, too. But
Yeah.
James likes his toys.
James like his toys, and like he has. It got a little infamous. Like I think that Cyclonus one was kind of the camel that broke a lot of people's
Yes,
back.
yes. Yeah, that one was a bit of a really. Although, having said that, I do find it interesting when I was rereading stuff. Much as I'm critical of how many fake outs there were,
Mm.
I was also a little bit surprised by how many deaths did stick
Oh
in
yeah,
season finales and such. Because James
definitely.
still did kill quite a few people. It's just that they tended to be a lot more blink and you'll miss about it in terms of character deaths in his finales.
Yeah.
Although you have some stuff like Ravage and Skids there, where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
those were like very powerful deaths.
Those mattered. Those were
Yes.
and like Skids has an impact. Ravage obviously was like so closely tied into Megatron's thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
like just those panels there of like when Ravage dies, like what really sells it is the 3 panels of Soundwave.
yeah, Soundwave just collapsing, like fantastic,
Yes,
absolutely
like
fantastic.
you know that there's no out when you see Soundwave reacting.
Yeah, so a character from another book is having a mental breakdown over this.
Yes. I love
But
Ravage, so that just hit me like
yeah,
when Ravage died.
no, Ravage was great. Ravage was so ambiguous in that book. I loved it.
Yes.
But yeah, it was something. It's not that I wanted everyone to die, but if he wasn't going to be pulling that cord, I think he overdid it. I think he fell down that trap too often because it was an easy dramatic thing you could do.
Yeah.
And it also, and I do think that, as I said, I think fandom began to have a lot of influence over how he wrote. He in a similar way, like I put something like Sherlock, actually, the TV show from the 2000s.
Right. Yes, I remember that.
Yep. Which season 3 for that is very much the fans say we can be clever, leave it too. Which led to a lot of disasters. But like those fake outs were so popular and got such a reaction from fans. I think he relied on them too much.
I do wonder, though, to the extent with fake outs, though, from the standpoint of like when Roberts was writing those, to what extent he thought that those were fooling the audience versus how much they actually did, because they had already going back to I'm trying to remember, was it the very beginning of More Than Meets the Eye, or was it Last Stand of the Wreckers, where he put down like the hard and fast, this is how you kill a Transformer, and basically
Wreckers.
Okay, that was Wreckers. Yes, so
No. It was issue 6. It was issue 6 with
the Rossum's Trinity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking that because he very much put down some hard and fast rules of as long as these 3 things are intact, they're not dead. And even then, there was exceptions to that because you could go on without transformation cogs and stuff like that. But
it was just like it could disrupt it, it could kill you, but it not like your brain and your spark are the important things.
But like with the Cyclonus thing, for instance, I seem to recall as well, like Roberts being a bit surprised by the reaction from the standpoint of, in his mind, Cyclonus was clearly not dead because, well, it takes more than that to kill a Cybertronian. But that wasn't the way it was portrayed on page. It's very much like it's the Hank Pym slapping Janet all over again there, where if you look at any interviews with the writers and stuff, like they absolutely did not intend for that to be as intense as it was, and basically everybody involved in that kind of regrets the way that actually got printed on the final page.
Yep,
because of how that shaped
made that the character.
Yeah, because of how that became the character. And yet everyone gives Peter Parker a free pass for doing the exact same thing in Clone Saga, just saying. But
well, it's Clone Saga.
He had actual narrative stress and cause to do that in Clone Saga, but
was it Peter? Can we ever say? Probably can.
Yeah, because there's like in the issue where it's revealed that Ben Reilly is the real one, Peter's the clone. He kind of goes a bit nuts.
Oh, you know what? They probably got away with that because it's like, oh, it's the clone, so it's not Peter. It's gonna eventually Ben's gonna, and then like obviously they reset it all. So
Clone Saga is a fascinating story if you ever look into the behind the scenes on that.
Yeah, it's
in terms of just how it was. We have a great thing that's going. Let's keep it going. Then they kept it too long, and then they couldn't find an out.
And that basically became Marvel.
Yeah, Mephisto got pitched as an out, and they decided to not use Mephisto as an out because they thought that was too unrealistic for Spider-Man. Like they were going to do time travel shenanigans with Mephisto, so that Ben was always the real Peter because time travel.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad Spider-Man would never get that like in trouble to rely on Mephisto for a ridiculous out for a problem you could have solved so easily.
Yeah.
Gunshot in Marvel Universe is the thing that required a reboot of the universe. But yeah, no, it was just for me. I think the fake outs started bothering me because they were just symptoms of what I saw as a larger problem, which was I thought that the book bought into itself too much. Like I said, it fell into, for me, the Sherlock trap of I'm very clever. And since I mentioned it, I do want to use this as sort of a segue into, like, for me, there was a huge drop in quality in Lost Light from the start. I didn't love any of it. There's good issues in there, I will say. There are good issues, but I didn't.
Right.
I have many. But for me, it was a change in narrative focus as well. Like, ironically, Lost Light felt like the one he was sure he'd have that 4-year story. He was sure, so he could do what he wanted, take as much time as he needed. Didn't really need to build up these characters or anything else. There was a strong move away from the actual cast of Lost Light, so that most of the existing cast were pretty insignificant until issue 10, 12.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of side stories in Lost Light.
You bring in the Tailgate stuff, which really made me dislike Tailgate because I don't like domestic violence is something that is just like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to deal with it. It's fucking horrible. Don't try to then say like, oh, isn't he sweet? Don't do that. Don't end it like, oh, thank God they got together. Because he ripped his boyfriend's face off. Literally. And like really turned me off a lot of things there. We like the pacing issues then got I think the problem is there's 3 things in the first half that I really strongly dislike, that then were compounded by massive pacing issues in the second half of the book, because he couldn't cut things out. He had a million things he wanted to use and he couldn't cut them out.
I think one thing, incidentally, with regards to pacing and such, and this goes back, I guess, like even season 2 of More Than Meets the Eye, that had a huge impact on the book, but no one really talks about it, was IDW changing their page counts.
Very much so. Very,
They cut
very much so.
Cutting 4 pages was the worst thing that happened to that book, I would argue, because Roberts needed those 4 pages.
Definitely. He's not good at compression.
He compresses a lot into his stories, but you can only compress so much.
Yeah, like, and like for me, it's that self-editing. It's that self-editing element, just like, this needs to go. And there was just this tone to the book. Like, it started, I would say, sort of mid season 2, but there was so much I like about season 2, I don't really care. But like, easy one, Roller isn't Tarn. Spoiler, I knew that for like a year and a half beforehand. But Roller isn't Tarn. Now that's a Game of Thrones season 8 level subversion, without being quite as insulting. But then, cool. Who's Roller?
Yeah, Roller was kind of just there.
I have no fucking idea.
We got him. Yeah.
But so
and then it just turned into, we're just gonna leave all those characters behind and then just move on with the core cast.
Yeah, except we're going to then leave the core cast behind a lot of the time. With someone else. Because so since I said, like, there's 3 things in the first half that really get me. And one of them, I feel like people always misunderstand what I mean by this. But so one is issue 7. I think issue 7 is the worst issue of the entire run. I think it is one of the worst Transformers issues, full stop. Because its entire point is to basically erase the entire previous season of the book. And then say, listen, we're leaving literally everything behind, but we're leaving character development behind, we're leaving relationships behind, we're leaving progression behind, and then we abandon the characters until issue 13. Or 12
which,
13.
Are we talking about
the one where they're leaving?
Yeah, here. Sorry.
Yeah, Lost Light, when they're leaving
Okay,
Necroworld.
sorry, I'm just double checking my memory here. So.
Yeah, it's when they leave Necroworld, and like everyone hates Megatron again. Tailgate and Cyclonus break up, kind of, and Tailgate puts himself in a box to get rid of his magic powers. They basically, all the story elements introduced in season 2 are completely sidelined, but Getaway. Everything. Yeah. And I found it insulting at the time. I hate the story that follows as well, the Nautica story, because it took a character I absolutely love and made her, in my mind, kind of irredeemable for who she suddenly became, which was, especially like the fandom thing of just like, oh, this was like not the fandom were going like, I'd really like if what's her name, the ship lady, Doctor Lady.
Velocity.
Velocity and Nautica were a couple, despite the fact that, apart from the fact they knew each other in the ship, we had no real background information for them. And despite the fact that it was really clear that there was at least some kind of romantic feelings between her and Skids, even if she wasn't willing to pursue them. But suddenly she's like willing to erase all memory of Velocity to revive Skids, which then turns into this really cruel thing of her forgetting who Skids is and not giving a shit, which has no meaning whatsoever except to be used for one panel towards the end for a like, oh, you can't use your powers on me. I don't even know who you are, sir. It erased a friendship that had been really important to me. It erased a possible romantic relationship. By pretending there hadn't been a romantic relationship, it really undermined what Nautica was doing, because suddenly she was just like saying like, listen, you've been my best friend for years, but I just like him better. as a friend.
Yeah. Like
Like
you
it's
really
a
don't get you really don't get the feeling it's just like a friendship with Nautica and Skids by the end of season 2.
you
So
really don't.
like
And
the Amika and Dura thing, like it is very much that feels like her covering, like she's still kind of like into not like doing that whole thing because then she can get Skids on that without actually admitting it.
yeah, like because she's really bad at these things.
Yep.
But then like if she was in love with Skids, it would make so much more sense what she was willing to do.
Hmm.
Rather than, listen, of my best friends, you're like number 2, but he was number 1. And then I forgot about him, so what the fuck? But it's still, she doesn't remember what she was doing to Velocity, but Velocity remembers what she did to Velocity. And then one of my big problems, certainly for the first 9 issues, she gets pulled back, but man, I don't like Anode. And man, I hate that Anode is basically the main character first 9 months of the book.
I never really disliked Anode myself, but I mean, I basically saw her from what she was like from day one. Was like, oh, hey, we got a new audience POV character. Okay.
Yeah, but she's hateful as a
Mm.
person. I just think she's unpleasant. Like Lug's fine. I ain't got no problem with
Oh, Lug
like
was fun. Yeah.
Lugs are fun. But for me, it was like we had this book that was getting rid of your POV character, your new POV character, Megatron. Like your biggest character, really. You were removing him from the book. And suddenly, like,
Yes. Yes.
a third to half the book is given to a convoluted, unbelievable psychological romance story that ends in the most ridiculous way possible. And then suddenly she's now getting, after she's here, and is just unpleasant to everyone around her. And suddenly I said this to James at the time, like I regret saying it to him actually, because that was a different time where I'd be like a bit more like, hey, person writing a story, listen to my opinion. But she had not earned that story role at that time, and then playing off her getting Lug back again in the most ridiculous that is still dumb in my mind, fell so flat, because why do I care what happens to Node at this stage? And then suddenly she, again, it's like major focus in the Nautica story. Now she's, to reveal something kind of cool about her, kind of interesting about her, in revealing like transgender transformers beyond
Yep.
RC and how they work and how they could exist like in the past and everything else, and how they can be Cybertronian and exist in the past, and like that's all like world building interesting kind of stuff.
Oh,
But
I thought that was great. I thought that was fascinating because it kind of dovetailed into like ideas I was already thinking about with regards to IDW stuff based on what had been established already.
yeah, but
So,
the problem was it was through her, and I hate her.
mm,
And unfortunately, that issue also kind of bit me in the ass a few times, because a lot of people would sort of go like, so you're just a bigoted jerk. Just like, no, I just don't like her. She's just not a nice person. And I'm being told to give a shit about what happens to her. And
that,
yeah, it was just like, for me, it like had such pacing problem. It was so slow. And then to jump into the rapid pacing of the next one, which had so many other problems as well. Like
right, because that
Nickel.
second half went super fast. Yeah.
Yeah, Nickel is a problem as well for me, because Nickel was introduced as an unrepentant, joyful monster. And there's a scene that I really hate in that scavenger story. She's looking at the scavengers and they're all talking, and she's like flashing back to when the DJD used to hang out and talk together, and we're all supposed to feel sad for her and her mass murdering sociopathic friends. Which again ties into me like that fandom thing where many of the fandom liked DJD as people and were really offended by the idea that they're evil. So I feel like, again, that was kind of like, listen, fans, I see you, but you
Yeah,
shouldn't see it too. They're
I liked
monsters.
Nickel. I liked Nickel as a character myself, but I also
Mm.
very much would be the first to recognize, oh, she is very clearly not like she is not a good person. I mean, there is some justifiable reason for some of her
Mm.
for some of her personality stuff, because like in her first appearance, they straight up established that she is the sole survivor of a
Mm,
colony
mm,
that
mm.
got massacred,
Mm.
and and then the people who find her are like the Decepticoniest of Decepticons.
Oh yeah.
So I completely understand like how that is going to be very like have a very formative thing on her, like as a person. So,
Mm, mm,
but yeah, like I don't know. I always kind of like Nicole, and I what I loved about the fact too is just that she kept the hard edges in that she would often do things that make you go, oh yeah, that's right, she is a Decepticon. Where it's like every so often she would take like a rash, like she would make the rash move. Like I was rereading the finale. There's the bit there where she uses like weapon on like a bunch of the zombies or whatever, and like
Mm.
while they're all discussing the ethics of doing that, she just turns it on. And it's like, right, she's a Decepticon. Yes,
Mm.
it's like I do like that aspect about her that the story would every so often remind you that yes, yeah, it's she's a fun character, but she is also not like a great person.
No, it's
Like she knew exactly what the DJD were, and the main thing that got her to falter with their with loyalty to them was actually less any of their murdery actions and more once they started murdering each other.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it was one of those things. Like if it was played like that a bit more, it would have been more. But it was feel sympathetic to her, and I just can't. Um, and yeah, Lost Light for me is just something I disconnected one so hard. But one thing I do want, like, since we kind of moved on to Lost Light, how do you feel about the actual Lost Light? Because essentially it's two stories. It's finding the Knights of Cybertron and the truth behind that, and then wrapping up Getaway, wrapping up Tyrest, wrapping up the Big Giant Spark, wrapping up the weird aliens living inside the Magnificence, which hadn't been
Yeah,
mentioned
the
since
Omega
Morton Meets
Guardians.
the Eye issue 13, if I remember correctly, or
Oh,
the
where they
annual.
mentioned that? Well, see, when I think of the Omega Guardians, I think all the way back to Spotlight Hot Rod.
No, they're in it, but they do get mentioned. And he said, like,
Hmm.
oh no, they were going to be a big part of the next story arc.
Hmm.
And there was a lot, and I was just like, hmm. I
I
hadn't,
can see that because he
yeah,
was setting them up as space Cthulhu's. So
yeah, which would have been cool, but
yeah,
did we need it? Did we need it
yeah.
taking up time?
I guess that's probably one of those vestiges of plot where because he thought he would have time for all this stuff, it was
Mm-hmm.
still built very much into his finale. Like I will say for all the compression that like the book had with regards to wrapping things up, the
Mm.
actual finale arc doesn't really feel that compressed because it is very clearly very well like it was more he cut stuff so that he could get the full finale in.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's a strength. That's overall, it sucks that we lost a bunch of stuff, but it is to a strength that the finale itself doesn't feel compromised. I mean, speaking as somebody who has like, who's read many, many a Furman book where Furman basically just had to wrap it all up really quickly.
Yeah, well, like an issue.
Yeah. It's like, or even like as someone who's a fan of, and this still stings all these years later, who was a fan of the Archie Sonic books and how that series ended.
Mm.
Like was just like the most unfair, it was the most unfair ending from the standpoint of we're midway into some story arcs and suddenly the book starts coming out and no one can comment on it, and it's like, oh yeah, there was all this license shenanigans going on behind the scenes and just stuff quietly died with no warning whatsoever.
Mm.
Like there were issues solicited that never came out.
Yep.
And I'm glad that all the people who worked on that book all continue to get work for IDW. Kudos to IDW for keeping all those people when they got the license. But
Mm.
it's yeah, no, it was a very unfair ending, like the way that book had, yeah. But then that whole like last 10 years of the book had a few moments of like just of uncontrollable things happening outside of the editorial room impacting the book in major ways. So
Definitely.
yeah, but
Mm.
yeah, I thought the finale, like it had a lot of stuff to do. It wrapped stuff up very well. It brought back Scorponok, which was like one of those things. Like honestly, that's one of the reasons I probably don't have the same memory of the Nautica storyline as you do, because it was like first of all, it was like, oh hey, sweet Flame. I remember him from what you call it. How am I forgetting? How am I blanking on the name of the old Marvel UK zombie story?
Oh, I remember.
City of
Oh,
Fear, yes.
there we
I
go.
was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh my god, it's Flame from City of Fear. Awesome. I love this deep cut there. And then, of course, we get the Scorponok reveal. And just to put in perspective how much I love IDW Scorponok, like I was like that guy on the IDW boards back in the early 2010s who kept speculating on how Scorponok was going to turn out to be behind Stefan Costa's run
Yeah,
and
yeah.
asking, well, when is Scorponok coming back, sort of thing.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of stuff here that feels like this could be another Scorponok scheme. And it's like, and then just for James to reward me the way that he did when he did the scavenger story there with Grimlock,
Mhm.
where we got Scorponok's grand scheme. That was one of my favorite moments of Lost Light. Just classic IDW Scorponok with the insane Bond villain level story,
Oh no,
convoluted scheme.
I really liked that scavenger story overall. It had a lot of moments I really liked, and yeah, I love Maximum Dinobot Scorponok, and he's fantastic. And he's just like, "Oh, I blew up a
I
house. Why? Why not?" Ah!"
I love how Maximum Dinobot's Scorponok grand scheme, once he reveals it all, is not like, haha, I'm going to take over the world or I'm going to make Megatron kneel before me. It is, soon, using my army, I will get all the defense contracts in the world. And Harad is like, wait, that's your plan? Shut
Yeah.
up! My plan
I,
is good, damn it. I'm gonna beat you up some more because you trash talked my stupid plan.
yeah. I wish we had more with the baby. I want to know what the baby's like.
Yeah, that
Um,
was an interesting thing, and like even just seeing all the speculative fan art people are doing and stuff too
mm,
with that, like that had the books kept going, which sadly wasn't going to happen. That would have been a very interesting thing to see.
I'm gonna say like there is a giant human child raised by Grimlock.
Well, it's a giant human child with a spark though,
Yeah,
which still fascinated me. Just the idea that it is very much, it's basically a Decepticon. Sorry.
yeah. There's not two of them. No, there's only one of them because
Yeah, because it
they
was
weren't on the Lost Light, were they? When they got
yeah, the
copied.
child was the prototype. So yeah.
Yeah, like the child. Grimlock didn't bring the child with him when they joined up with the Lost Light. So like, there's two Grimlocks, but there's not two children.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine, for instance, like with the stuff there with the child there, if that issue had come out like now in this zeitgeist, considering things like the Mandalorian have since come out and the whole there's been a resurgence of that lone wolf and cub style story.
Oh my God, Grimlock, Willow
Because
Wolf and Cub.
that is straight
Yes,
up a spin-off right there, Grimlock with the child.
yes,
That is a fantastic spin-off, and I want to read that.
yes. Oh man, just because like, what will you teach a child? Kill that one. Why? Okay, now kill that one. Okay, keep going until there's no more. Oh,
And
we
then just the child grappling with the idea of the symbol on its face that it has no understanding of, and the baggage
yeah,
that comes with that symbol.
man. It's oh my God. There's so much you could do.
There's a great series right here.
Mm. Yeah, no, there is. Hey, remember how you did a really good Grimlock book, and then you were going to do Grimlock in Hell, and the fucking company lost the license? Ah, I'm not over it.
Oh, they were going to do Grimlock in Hell next?
Steve Orlando told me that yes, they were. He had a pitch sent into IDW and confirmed for Grimlock in Hell, because originally the idea was instead of
Oh,
Optimus pulling him through, the Necrobot would pull him through to Hell, and it would be about Grimlock killing his god.
oh man, that would have been fascinating. Just like that King Grimlock mini was a lot of fun.
Yep. And then you could
Just
have
like
Grimlock in
Grimlock,
Hell.
yeah, yeah, that would have been great. Oh my god. It's like
Yep.
how when we got those like unused covers there for like the idea of that they were going to wrap stuff up with like a grand crossover thing of some sort for IDW, and then that never happened.
Yep.
Where it's like, oh, that would have been a good send off to the book, especially thinking back to how like when IDW first got the license, one of the potential directions was doing a Cybertron Crisis on Infinite Earths type thing,
Mm-hmm.
like with Transformers Cybertron as the backdrop.
Yeah, very, very much so. And it's left us in an interesting case with the license loss, because like one thing with Lost Light, it was very, very clear the intent was to have the opportunity to bring the Lost Light crew back
Hmm.
at some point for a crossover. Um,
It's an
so
interesting and I guess that since you're going into it, I guess we can talk
mm,
like the very end of Lost Light as well too,
mm,
from
mm,
a
mm.
standpoint of, because I was thinking about this too, just how it is very much the ending that lets you have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. Also, I believe I give it 10 out of 10 back in the day. I think it's an excellent ending.
Yeah, like it's
Mm.
fascinating how like it managed to do that weird thing of doing closure while at the same time not doing like leaving things open ended.
Mm.
And
Um,
the closure is one of those things where it's like where I love narratives that have closure. That doesn't mean I always enjoy the closure because of you know like it's it's bittersweet often. So
Yeah.
especially when things close in the ways you don't want them to, but that make sense narratively.
Oh god, absolutely. And I think like from a marketing and we don't know what it's going to be like, and we need to be willing to push a button and say here, let's bring in a bunch of old readers because hey, your characters are coming back. Like it made sense not just from as you say from that closer sense of just like here's your dark, a little bit depressing, but ultimately maybe a bit realistic that not everyone gets their happy ending, and
Mhm.
also here's your hopeful they're all off to have adventures forever moment.
Yep.
Um, it works narratively and works from corporate side of things because they would always
Yes.
have that card to pull.
Exactly. Like it still hits me honestly, like the way like when I was rereading stuff, just the way Rodimus's story ends. Like
I
that was
really
just
like that.
that was the most depressing thing, and it was like it was narratively, it was an interesting ending. I'm not gonna say it was a bad end. It was a bad ending for the character or a non-fitting ending, but it was
Mm-mm.
still depressing to see that he basically like just tracing IDW Rodimus here as a character. Like going back, because Autocracy wasn't written, I guess, when this stuff started. But
Mm.
like going back to Spotlight Hot Rod, there, one of the things that defined the character was the idea that yes, he is this daredevil. He is this daredevil with all this like I'm going to jump in head first energy, but a lot of that is all very much him papering over the fact that he has some very like deep seated trauma over losing people under his command,
Mm.
and he can't stop to face that, because if he stops to face that, he can't deal with that. So he just keeps moving forward. Keeps moving forward, putting himself in daredevil, crazy, impulsive situations where doesn't have the time to think about that.
Mm.
Like just even the whole Lost Light quest, it's like at that point he is still like grappling with the consequences of his actions there on Earth, and all the screw ups that he did in the Costa run. And his next impulse is I'm going to just forget about all that and throw myself into this new thing entirely, so that I don't have to think about any of that.
Mm.
And just the way that it ends there, where it's like he is still doing the same thing, except he is not doing as good a job of faking it anymore.
Definitely. I think that's a really good way of phrasing it. Like he's been running from like his own worries and fears and confusion and everything else for his whole life, really,
Hmm.
that
Yep.
we've known him anyway. And the Lost Light doesn't end with him reestablishing his life and regrounding himself. It ends up with it all catching up to him, and he can't run
Yeah,
anymore
because
because he's working under someone else. He's not making decisions,
yeah,
and he's depressed and drunk and. Hmm,
yeah, he's got nothing to go back to. He's got nothing. He's got nothing really. So I
yeah.
suppose like he is an empty person. I mean, at least with Swerve in the end, that was like like Swerve kind of got weirdly a happy end in the standpoint of there's the whole element of yeah, his business venture failed, but he still got the one bar. He still got his friends he gets to see and stuff like that. Like he is ultimately Swerve is like his ambitions failed, but he is at the point where he has something.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he has friends, like he does see his friends every so often. He's got his bar, he's got his regulars, like he is no longer the person who feels like he nobody appreciates him.
No, I think no, I think Swerve actually got a really nice ending. World got a nice
Hmm.
that like I'm
Oh yeah,
not
Worlds.
broken.
Oh man, Worlds was
I'm not
sad.
broken.
Worlds was
Yeah.
Worlds was also really sad. Just the idea that he was somebody who, like, without the focus, just regressed.
Mm, mm. But
He
I
just
just love that moment where he says like just thank him and say I'm not broken, which is like
yeah.
because he's been he has viewed himself as a lost cause
Hmm.
his entire life.
Yes.
And just that
Yes.
moment of I appreciate the offer, but I am not broken.
Also, the
Mm,
symmetry on the hug.
that was a nice one.
Yes,
Um,
where it just goes back from just like the "I will kill you" hug to the "Okay, yeah, I actually have friends who appreciate me" hug.
yeah, like
Because
everyone's
at
got
that point,
something in that.
everyone in World's life used him.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That is such a like he was a tool, and it took so much for him to get to the stage where he could be around people who saw him as something else.
Hmm.
Um, and like juxtaposed with the stuff in the more modern times, like we get stuff for the Scavengers feck off, and then the trial for Megatron, and like I like how we were talking about it earlier. So much of that issue is framed from the point of view of, wow, Prowl is awful.
Yeah.
Wow, Prowl, you are the worst possible person. Which credit to John for all the work he did to make it like, no, Prowl actually is a terrible person and will never
Yes.
actually not be a good, he's never going to be, Prowl is never going to be redeemed because ultimately he always comes back to, but I was right.
And ultimately, even then, like, full credit goes to Nick there because he is the one who set Prowl down that path.
Oh my God. Nick, especially like when he was writing records as well, when he brought in that idea, like where Tarantulas just goes like, you're constantly trying, every so often you're doing this shit and then you try and reinvent yourself for half a day.
Yes.
And then
Tarantulas just calls him out. Yes.
Yeah. Just like, we all know you're going to go back to being an asshole.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking even that the old story there that Nick did during like the All Hail Megatron Coda stuff with Prowl.
Yeah, that's such a good story.
That really set Prowl on the direction.
That is such an important story, and it led to so much annoyance when Mike Costa didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah, and then we kind of got the weird, but then in fairness to Costa's stuff, that did lead to the element in in the second Records book where Tarantulas is calling out Prowl for just every so often he cosplays as being the good guy.
Yeah, Nick did a great job with that, and like bringing it, like again, it was just like, listen, given we're gonna build in it, we're gonna see where it goes. It's like every so often something happens that makes you reinvent yourself, but then you'll never ever stick with it.
And to me, that's like the mark of a great writer, and like like a continuity heavy book that has multiple writers there, where you bring in someone who not only doesn't ignore past continuity, but is able to make it work in context.
Absolutely.
Like even make the weaker stuff work. Like that takes a lot of skill to be able to take the weaker stories and build on those.
It is trying to integrate other people's work is always a struggle in my opinion, and trying to do it with stuff like where it's like it's not just stuff that's from other people, it's stuff that didn't really gel at the time. And this is just like I could go on about that for ages.
And importantly, to work in the weaker stories by other people without throwing those stories under the bus.
Exactly. It's
that takes a lot of skill, because there's a lot of writers who will just do that by just like come in and they will throw the stuff no one liked under the bus and be like, well, no one liked it anyway.
Yeah, to a point of being like really fucking petty sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you get some really petty stuff in comics. It's like, yeah. I'm trying to think of an example right now, but it's like, but yeah, no, there are definitely examples of that. I just thought of one. Again, this is Sonic stuff, and this for the US books.
God.
So you won't be as familiar with this, but just I don't know if you know the name Ken Penders, but
I do know the name Ken Penders, yes.
Because there was some definite elements of that because it was his way or the highway.
I was reading up on a lot of stuff recently to do with Sonic, and just going like, what the fuck? And then suddenly it's just like, oh, it not just fucked over all the comics, it just fucked over Sonic in general, because Sega went nuts and said like, okay, we're going to avoid this situation ever happening again by making it untenable to. I don't know how the current writer, Flynn, I don't know how Ian Flynn is managing under the ridiculous edicts of Sega because of Ken Penders. Like,
I mean, full credit to him in terms of just how he has managed to. The man had to do two separate like he's done multiple reboots of Sonic because of that. We had a first one where he in the middle of a story that was very like, just to put in context, we had a story there that was like a Knuckles story that was using a bunch of old Ken Penders characters that people that hadn't been seen in a while, people liked seeing them. And then because in midway through the story, all of the lawsuit stuff was going on, they suddenly had to start pulling all those characters from the comic. So in between the penultimate and the in between the second last and last issue in that story arc, all the Ken Penders characters got fridged into another zone off screen. And it was very weird, like just the way, like he did the best with what he could do in a lot of those cases. But like there was full on like narrative arcs that just the impact of it then being, oh, we can't use any because of this can of worms that got opened. We can't use any characters that weren't explicitly signed off as we own these, which then basically killed the entire, like meant they had to get rid of just about the entire supporting cast that had been around for the last like 15, 20 years.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
It was insane. And they used a Mega Man crossover to reboot that.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember reading about that.
that was fascinating from the standpoint of just how it, because they had just done a temporary reboot storyline before that where they like as a short period thing, and then like during the Mega Man story, the decision came down to make those changes, and the fact they made it work somehow was
Mm.
kind of nuts.
Oh.
Like it's,
But
and then we got it, and then we got like a long running, like after they did that, they like we got the background story of the game basically became Sonic Unleashed as the framework for the
mm.
next 2 years of the comic. And it was just and we got the whole thing of, oh, we can't use these characters, but there's a lot of characters that that Sega does own that we can use that have been used in other media, so they started pulling into that roster.
Yeah, and now Penders is still crazy and is still trying to get a bunch of money for characters that he didn't actually make.
Yeah. It's
Did you see? Did you see the? We're going off topic now, but screw it. But did you see the
sorry.
stuff with Scourge in the last couple of months?
Oh, is there more stuff with Scourge other than his that one spin-off thing? Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Never
Well,
mind that all the
yeah,
interesting stuff that got done with the character was done after he left the book.
yeah. But for anyone who doesn't know, Scourge was basically evil Sonic in Archie. He started off blue and then he turned green. And I think he was actually like Penders has laid claim to a lot of characters he did not create. I think he actually did have something to do with making Scourge.
He wrote the first issue with the Mirror Universe Sonic way back in like issue
Okay.
13 or whatever. That's where
Which,
that comes from, because they did an
yeah,
evil universe where everyone wore leather.
yeah, and then like Flynn and the rest turned him into Scourge. But
Yes.
and then like he basically was going to do a comic with a really, really fucking dodgy comic company, like the dodgiest fuckers. And he solicited. He was expecting like it was like Scourge the Speed Demon. There was no design changes or anything else, and then it like. It got cancelled like 2 days later, 2 weeks later.
I didn't see
like
the
that.
aftermath. I didn't
And
see
like
the aftermath, but
he
I
went
remember seeing it and
off
cringing.
on one. Oh my god! He was like screaming at people online, and like suddenly like a lot of like a lot of bloggers and stuff used to like really go after him. We're suddenly like rising up again and going like, "Hey, do you know Ken Penders? He's an arsehole." It was so good. But yeah. So Ken Penders,
Moving
he's
back
a
on the
dickhead.
topic though, yeah.
Ken Penders, dickhead. But yeah, no. I've kind of covered what I wanted to say about More Than MTMTE and Lost. You want to touch on?
I'm just double checking there. We talked about Rodimus, Megatron, the kill count stuff. I'm just glancing back over just the stuff that I'd written down there.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did hit a lot of the... Oh yeah, there is actually one thing that can touch on that. I'm sure we will actually like be on slightly different sides here, which is the use which is how Roberts would sometimes reinvent certain characters that hadn't been used in a bunch of stuff. Specifically in this case, I want to touch on Starsaber.
Oh, I like Starsaber. I like that design a lot, but I like Starsaber.
Oh, so I couldn't remember if you were a fan of his portrayal or not in More Than Meets the Eye Lost Light.
I don't like how it ended because I think it was just rushed as fuck, but I like the idea of taking this character who, let's be honest, was a nobody. Like there was nothing to him beyond heroism, and just going like, let's give him something. And because the fact it all tied back to fan fiction they wrote years ago before they knew who Starsaber was, they just saw the design and said he looks like a knight zealot lunatic. Just like, cool. No, I dug it. I wish there was a lot more to him. But I loved it.
Yeah, it's one of those things worth bringing up because that was one of the very controversial elements in season one that showed up, like the way, and it's still talked about today, like just the way Starsaber was portrayed in those books.
Yeah.
I was bringing that up to. I'm trying to remember who I was bringing that up to just when I was talking about that briefly yesterday, and and just with regards to Starsaber, there's the element of, well, to what extent do people know Starsaber because he showed up in More Than Meets the Eye and because people got upset about it?
Mm-hmm.
And that because, it was a very different characterization. I loved it myself because it's one of those rare, he's the perfect example in a case study of the evil paladin.
Yeah, no, actually,
That's the thing I loved about him the most, that he is very much like, he is the righteous character, except he is righteous for the wrong guy, but he is very much like not like he doesn't see himself as ha ha ha, I'm evil, I'm selfish, I'm doing all this hedonistic stuff. He is like, no, I have a righteous cause. I'm just a righteous cause for the wrong guy. And
Hmm.
in this world where we see all this crazy like extremism in this world and such there, like in this day and age, it's one of those characters that does resonate a little bit. So
Hmm.
considering the times, like of just having these extremists who the scariest extremists are the ones who actually believe the stuff they're spouting.
Oh, never be afraid of someone who's saying something because they think they'll benefit. Always be afraid of someone who actually thinks they're telling the truth.
Yeah, those are the scary people, the ones that are actually bought in, especially because then if you try and challenge their worldview, their approach is generally there's two approaches. There's either admit you're a fool this entire time and lose face because in your own mind because of that, or double down hard.
Oh yeah,
And one is way easier than the other.
it's yeah, no, it's something else really, and
But
yeah,
yeah, it
he's
brought Star Saber
oddly
back to the
all
fore
things.
in
Yeah.
Transformers in general there. And I mean, I want and we're getting the HasLab figure now. I am hyped for that Star Saber, but let's be honest, to an extent, would they have managed to get the attention on Star Saber? I guess that's the question. Would Star Saber have been able to get to the point of getting that figure, like if it weren't for stuff like Morton Meets the Eye doing such a wildly divergent portrayal of him?
Yeah, I always want the masterpiece Star Saber box. I never want the figure really,
Mm.
but I want the box because the bio is IDW Star Saber.
Oh yeah, that's right. The Australian bio was the IDW one. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
They did the Australian release.
because the
Yes.
guy who was doing it was a fan of that Star
Yeah.
Saber. So,
Yeah. And
um,
then conversely, you have Deathsaurus, who was like
mm,
more
uh,
like I mean, he got a much more like I guess faithful interpretation
yeah,
in the
no, I
sense.
would say that he's more like manga-ish faithful than
Yes,
he's faithful
manga-ish
to
faithful. Yes,
bio
yes.
manga, not necessarily anime. Where
Mhm.
he was just like a dickhead, but I loved it. So I'm so annoyed that we've never gotten a toy of that, and I hate everyone who voted for Optimus Primal back in Power of the Primes. Every single one of you.
Who was a fan of that primal, much as I'm sad that we didn't get the Deathsaurus there, it's
Still
I'm sorry,
evil.
but that primal led to us getting the best optimal Optimus Deco ever made, which was the SDCC one.
Yeah, it is a good looking toy.
Because somehow nobody ever thought of doing that deco until then, and it was like absolutely the best deco.
Yeah, no, it's a really good deco. It's a really good looking
But
toy. But you're still
yeah,
evil,
hmm
and you need to accept
I
this.
do love just yeah. Overall, though, we have like just stuff like the impact though on like you're talking about toys and stuff. Like yeah, it still
Mm.
felt years later. We got all the Hasbro stuff. Mastermind Creations like made a lot of lemonade off of those designs.
Oh yeah, Mastermind Creation is going to be living off those for a very long.
It's all starting to wind down though.
You think?
But
I think they're coming back to it occasionally.
well, the thing that's interesting though about that is the fact that it took like 4 years after the book ended for stuff to start winding down.
Mm-hmm.
Like as I've heard, like the sales on some of those aren't like what they used to be in terms of the figures and stuff like Death Source happened because and even just the last couple DJD guys because it was a case of well we've already put so much money into these that we kind of may as well release them at this point.
Yeah, yeah,
Like Death Source took years to happen because of some engineering stuff and
yeah. That was,
yeah like those
was
last two DJD guys I can't see them having made money on those. Those are massive figures.
mm.
They're gorgeous
Um,
figures but they're massive.
no, the price is like something else.
hmm Yeah,
But
it's like when the Fans Project did the Dino King shells, where they
mm,
absolutely did not make money on those shells,
no, they definitely did not.
but those shells are gorgeous,
With all my dogs
and I'm sad I
explode.
don't have room to display them anymore.
All my dogs are like exploding in the background. But yeah, no, those the shells were good. I was always disappointed. They like clearly they were intended to be something else. They were clearly intended to be more stylized and posable. Like
Yeah.
like I remember the original solicit for that.
Mm.
But
But
anyway, yeah, Star Saber. He's great.
mhm. Yeah, I was curious. I couldn't remember what your take on Star Saber was, so I was fully expecting this to turn into some sort of a debate. That's like, oh well, we are both on the same page here. Okay.
Fight, fight, fight.
But I mean, yeah, like I do think though that definitely did have a role in bringing him back into people's consciousness because of how that book was being read and because people talked about Star Saber.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're getting that gorgeous new Star Saber figure.
Yeah. Which does look really fucking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm happy to wrap it up there because we've been going for about 2 hours.
yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, they were good books, and I guess yeah, like thank you for having me on.
I'm very happy to. So, I do have a question. I have two questions actually. This is going to everyone who is on one of these shows. Two questions. So, if you could say anything to IDW, having read books that they've been producing since 2005,
Hmm.
what would it be?
If I could say anything to IDW, that's a good question. I've had lots of thoughts in the past at different points in junctures and such.
Hmm.
I guess it's weird thinking about it. It's hard for me to think of anything to say because there's just I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of like writers and artists through conventions
Hmm.
and stuff. So not really a lot left to say other than I am just very I I would actually be more interested in talking to whoever picks up the license next,
That was the
specifically
next
say,
question, actually.
oh, okay, okay.
The next
I
question
guess to
was
IDW,
talking to
I
the.
guess, all
Go on.
right, for the first question though, I guess I will just say overall to IDW, like a big thank you to the company for just all the fan artists that they helped bring up through the pipeline over the years on the Transformers books.
Hmm.
Like a lot of fan creators who all got opportunities because IDW decided to like hire these guys based on their online portfolios and such. And we've gotten a lot of great artists out of that whole process over the years. Like some, I mean, yeah, we got Sarah out of that. I mean, Casey Collar came out of a cover contest.
Yep.
I mean, there's Kei Zama, yeah, Saren Stone. Yeah, so many like fantastic. Oh, and Margaret Scott, of course. Oh
Of
my God,
course.
like what's she working on these days anyway?
Um,
I know she's very involved in
Marvel,
the
I think.
Animation Guild union stuff, but I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
what
yeah.
she's
I think she
working
did
on.
some Marvel stuff off the top of my head, but
But
um,
oh, you might be right. She might like I know she's doing something in animation, but I can't remember. But
hmm,
we just got so many fantastic voices who they took a chance on, and that chance paid dividends because they ended up just putting so much back into the book that other writers were able to do things with.
hmm, very much so.
Like Barber's Starscream conclusions owe a lot to Margaret
Oh
stuff.
yeah, absolutely.
Roberts owes a lot to that stuff as well too. I mean, just for how Windblade stuff was handled, even like it's yeah, there was so much stuff that is owed to just the depth of all the artists. And yeah, huge thank you to everyone who worked on these books. And like, I did not regret paying twice for all those things because I was buying the digitals and the physicals. So, and then
Mm.
three times often because of the fact that I wanted to then get the trades later on. I still need
um,
to buy a bunch of the trades for
oh yeah.
like the last era of IDW, and that window is closing soon, I suppose.
Very quickly, I'm afraid. I don't think the hardcover collection's getting finished.
No, no, you guys lucked out because you guys got the one company that finished all that stuff.
Yep. But in that case, next company's coming along. We've all heard the rumors about who it might be.
Mhm.
What what one thing would you want to say to them as they take up this license?
The one thing I would say is, yeah, like there are so many talented artists in the Transformers community, so many talented artists, colorists, writers who have all been with this book, who have all been with this property for years and years. Please, like, I guess to appropriately, because this is a More Than Meets the Eye Lost Light podcast, to quote the last words of Rung, don't forget me.
Yeah.
You have all these people who have just like they've done so much for the book, and unfortunately for some reason it seems very hard for people who work on licensed books to get work outside of licensed books,
Mm.
and they are all fantastic artists. Please keep giving them work because I like being able to buy things that those people have contributed to. So many of them are fantastic people, like Alex Milne, Josh Perez, Josh Burcham. I mean, yeah, like the whole roster that I mentioned earlier there of artists as well. Marcelo, Guido, like there are so many fantastic artists that we have gotten to know over the years, and I really hope we don't lose them.
Mm. Yeah, no, there's some fantastic people who come out of the fandom. And like it was also like it means we're always willing to try something new. We're always
Yes.
willing to take a risk on an artist whose style may not necessarily be standard
Hmm.
and is creative and like freedom and
Yeah.
fresh design takes and fresh aesthetics. It's like also so important. And it's so
Yeah.
common in other areas of comic books and so rare in licensed comic books
Yeah.
in general.
And that goes for writers too. Don't take
Mm.
like please do what this entire era of comics did and be willing to take risks,
Mm,
narratively
mm.
speaking.
Very much so.
Like
Do
the
not
the
fall
best
into
thing that
the
IDW
mistakes
ever
one.
did was end the war.
Yeah, no, it was the most important story move they ever made.
Yes, and what we all figured was like, oh, this isn't gonna last because it's comics, ended up actually lasting, which is still amazing.
Mm.
The fact that the change actually took still is like, when you look back on it in comics, that never happens.
Oh God, no. No,
They
no,
kind
no.
of try. They had it, especially when we already got the false start of ending the war, like with Costa's run.
Yeah. Which
It's
was so weird because nothing about that. The war was just plodding along the entire time. There was constant fighting. Just like we were just constantly being told the war is over.
yes, and so no one really believed it when the war was over, and then in retrospect, oh, the war actually was over, huh?
Yeah. Listen, one day I'm going to give my answers to those questions, but not today. But no, so much important stuff came out of this era. Anyway, thank you so much. I have enjoyed this immensely.
Thank you so much for
It
having
has
me.
been really fun. Any social media, anything you want to pimp out?
I guess for social media stuff there, I mean, like as got mentioned earlier, you can find me like on mostly post on Twitter and stuff. Still, all these years later, at General Tekno, like just random stuff. I mean, like if I work on a custom or something, I'll usually throw something up there.
Mhm.
But I guess for main output, like most all my stuff can be found like just through my own social accounts. I dabble with comic stuff here and there, but I really need to get back to that, so I'm not going to plug. I'm not putting that stuff out regularly enough to plug it, but that's the main resource, I guess, to find that stuff. Like find me ranting about like just random stuff or just reacting to all the like stuff going on in the world, or random Genshin Impact comments. That game's the best.
Oh dear. Okay, so if you want to check him out, go check General Tekno on Twitter. With me, of course, Moonbase 2 on Twitter, and Irish Pillow and everywhere else. If you want to look at us on Patreon or Facebook or Libsyn, anything like that, always welcome to. Guys, hopefully this will be out soon, and hopefully we'll have another one out of these next month, as long as my schedule keeps or gets more normal. But yeah, so don't have anything fancy to end this one. Just want to say thank you again, General Tekno, for showing up. Really glad to have you. Please make more lug nuts. And yeah,
I've got one in the works.
good man. We'll talk to you all again. Bye.
Bye.